Listen, what I'm about to tell you. I still can't sleep right. I mean it. Look, I've been on the force for 8 years now, right? I've seen overdoses, I've seen domestics that went sideways, I've pulled kids out of wrecked cars at 3 in the morning. You think you get numb to it after a while, but this was different, man. This was something else entirely. December 2023, middle of the night shift, coldest winter we'd had in years. I'm talking that bone-deep cold that makes your breath hurt, and dispatch crackles over the radio about a disturbance at Liberty Heights Apartments. Nothing crazy, just some building manager complaining about flickering lights and weird noises coming from Unit 4B. Standard stuff, you know? Could have been a domestic, could have been someone having a mental health episode, could have been kids messing around. Hayes and I, we grab our gear and head over there thinking we'll be done in 20 minutes, maybe file a report, maybe take someone downtown to cool off. I swear to God, I had no idea what we were walking into. No clue whatsoever. As we're pulling up to the building, Hayes looks at me and goes, "You smell that?" And honestly, yeah, I did. Even from the parking lot, even in that freezing air, there was this smell, like someone was burning incense mixed with something rotten, something metallic and sweet that made your stomach turn. It reminded me of this homicide scene I worked 2 years back, where a guy had been dead for 3 days in August. That same copper penny smell, but off somehow like it was trying to hide under perfume or something. The door to 4B was already open when we got there. That's never a good sign. I'm standing there in the hallway, hand on my flashlight, and Hayes is radioing in our position while I'm looking at this door that's just cracked open about 6 inches. The building manager, older guy, super nervous, won't even come up the stairs with us. He told us the tenant was this woman named Eleanor Vance, early 30s, lived alone, quiet type. Never caused problems before tonight. But now there's this gap in the doorway, and that smell is just pouring out, thick enough to taste. Hayes finishes her radio call and looks at me, and I can see she's thinking the same thing I am. We gotta go in, but neither of us wants to. We announce ourselves, police, we're coming in, the whole routine, but there's no response. Just silence. And then, I swear this is true, we hear this low humming sound, like someone's chanting or singing under their breath. It's not loud, but it's constant, and it's coming from somewhere deep inside the apartment. So we push the door open all the way, and oh man, the scene inside was like something out of a horror movie. I'm not exaggerating. The entire living room was pitch black except for these candles, dozens of them, maybe 50 or 60, arranged in these perfect circles on the floor. And drawn between them in what looked like thick black paint or tar were these symbols, these pentagrams and shapes I'd never seen before. The floor felt wrong under my boots, sticky and wet like someone had spilled syrup everywhere. "Hayes, we need backup," I said, but my voice came out quieter than I meant it to. We're moving through the apartment, sweeping with our flashlights, and every step I take, my boot makes this gross squelching sound on the hardwood floor. There are these dark footprints leading from the living room down the hallway toward what I'm guessing is the bedroom, and they're not regular footprints. They're smeared, dragged, like someone was stumbling or crawling. Hayes is behind me, breathing real shallow, and I can tell she's freaked out too, but trying to keep it professional. We follow the trail, and the humming gets louder the closer we get to the bedroom door. It's still that same low monotone chant, but now I can almost make out words. Except they're not English, they're not Spanish, they're nothing I've ever heard in my entire life. My hand's shaking a little when I push open the bedroom door, and that's when we see her. Eleanor Vance, sitting in this wooden chair in the middle of the room, facing away from us. She's wearing this ratty bathrobe that's torn and stained, and her hair's all matted down with sweat or something worse. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. She's got a piece of broken glass in her right hand, and she's just slowly, methodically dragging it across her left forearm, over and over and over. Deep cuts, the kind that should be gushing blood, but she's not stopping, not crying, not reacting at all. I've seen people hurt themselves before, but never like this. Never this calm. "Ma'am, I need you to put down the glass," I say, trying to keep my voice level and authoritative, but honestly my heart's hammering so hard I think she can probably hear it. She doesn't stop. She doesn't even acknowledge that we're there. Just keeps dragging that glass across her skin, and now I can see the floor around her chair. It's pooled with this dark liquid that's definitely coming from her arm, but something's wrong with it. It's too dark, too thick. Blood doesn't look like that. Blood doesn't move like that. Hayes is on my left now, and she's reaching for her radio to call for an ambulance, and that's when Eleanor starts talking. Not to us, she's still facing away, but to the wall in front of her, and she's saying the same phrase over and over. The veil is thin here. I can see the watcher. The veil is thin here. I can see the watcher. Her voice is flat, emotionless, like she's reading from a script she's memorized. I move around to get a better angle, to try to see her face, and that's when I notice what's written on the wall behind her in that same dark substance. It demands the black salt. The handwriting is shaky and desperate, letters running into each other, some of them backwards or upside down. My training tells me to secure the weapon, to get control of the situation, but my gut is screaming at me that we should leave. We should back out right now and call someone else, anyone else. Then she turned around and smiled at us, and that's when I knew we'd stepped into something we had no business being near. I've seen a lot of smiles in this job. Fake ones, nervous ones, drugged out ones, crazy ones. But Eleanor's smile? It was wrong. It was too wide, stretched out past where a normal human smile should end, and her lips were cracked and bleeding at the corners like her face couldn't contain it. Her eyes were bloodshot, completely red. The whites were just gone, and they weren't focusing on anything. She was looking at us, but also through us, like we were ghosts, and she was seeing something behind us, something bigger. Hayes gasped, literally gasped out loud, and took a step back, and I don't blame her one bit because in that moment, every instinct I had was telling me to run. But we're cops, right? We're trained for this. So I move in to try to take the glass from her hand, and that's when I see her arm up close. The cuts she'd been making, they weren't bleeding red. The liquid coming out was black, thick like motor oil, and it didn't drip normal, it kind of oozed and moved on its own. I grab her wrist, and her skin is ice cold, and she just lets me take the glass without any resistance. Then she leans in real close to my face, still smiling that horrible smile, and whispers in this voice that doesn't sound like it's coming from her throat. The black salt must be paid. Hayes is calling for the bus now, shouting into her radio, and I'm trying to get Eleanor into cuffs, but she's not fighting, she's just limp and compliant and still whispering. We got her in the ambulance, but she coded before they even made it out of the parking lot. The paramedics showed up maybe 5 minutes later, felt like an hour, and by that point Eleanor had just gone completely silent. Not unconscious, not asleep, just silent. Still awake, still staring, but not making a sound. They loaded her onto the stretcher, and I remember one of the EMTs, this guy I'd worked with before on other calls, he looks down at her arm, and then looks at me with this expression like, "What the hell happened here?" I couldn't explain it to him. I still can't explain it to you. They got her in the back of the ambulance, started in 4, all the standard stuff, and we followed behind in our patrol car to do the paperwork at the hospital. But we didn't even make it out of Liberty Heights before Hayes' radio crackles, and the paramedic's voice comes through saying they've lost her pulse. They're starting compressions, she's coding. 26 minutes later, they called it at County General. Cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest brought on by acute blood loss and possible drug intoxication. But here's what they don't tell you in the reports. The toxicology came back clean. Completely clean. No drugs, no alcohol, nothing. And the substance they found in her apartment, the stuff she'd been using to draw on the walls and floor, they never could identify it. Sent it to 3 different labs, and all 3 came back with unknown organic compound. I went back to that apartment 2 days later for a follow-up, and I swear on my life, the air still felt heavy there. Wrong. Like something had opened up that night and never quite closed. I requested a transfer to day shift after that. Haven't worked nights since. I'm telling you right now, what I saw that day broke every rule of nature I ever learned. October 1993, middle of the Mojave Desert, and I'm sweating through my uniform before I even get out of the patrol car. I'm Deputy Sergeant Maria Rodriguez. Been with San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department for 12 years at that point, and I thought I'd seen everything this desert could throw at me. Drug runners, illegal dumping, heat stroke victims, car accidents where the asphalt literally melted people's skin. You name it, I'd worked it. But that morning when dispatch called me about a possible body off I-15, something in the dispatcher's voice made my stomach drop. She said, and I quote, "Maria, we got a weird one. Caller says there's a man out there who looks like he's been frozen solid." I remember laughing, right? Because it was already pushing 95 degrees at 8 in the morning, and we were headed into what was going to be a 110-degree day easy. Frozen solid in the desert? I figured it was some confused tourist who'd found a body that had been out there a while, maybe bloated from the heat. You know how bodies can look weird after decomposition starts in extreme temperatures. So I grabbed my kit, radio in that I'm heading out to the coordinates they gave me, and I start driving down this dusty service road that runs parallel to the highway. The whole drive out there, maybe 20 minutes, I'm thinking about my paperwork, about how I gotta process this scene, call the coroner, do the whole routine. I wasn't prepared. Nobody could have been prepared for what I found out there in that sand. The moment I saw him, my brain just refused to accept what my eyes were showing me. I pull up to the location, and there's already two guys standing there about 50 yards back from something on the ground. They're from this archaeological dig site that's been working in the area for a few weeks, studying some old Native American settlements or something like that. They flag me down, both of them looking pale and shaken, and one of them, younger guy, maybe 25, wearing a UCLA t-shirt, he just points and says, "I don't understand what I'm looking at." I walk over, and Jesus Christ, there he is. Michael Finn, though I didn't know his name yet, just lying there face down in the sand, and he's completely encased in ice. Not frost, not condensation, thick, solid ice like you'd see on a frozen lake in Minnesota in January. I'm talking 2-3 inches thick, covering his entire body, crystallized and white, with that cloudy frozen look to it. The sun is beating down on all of us. I can feel sweat running down my back, the air's shimmering with heat waves, and this man is a human popsicle in the middle of the Mojave Desert. I kneel down next to him, not even thinking about preserving the scene yet because my mind is trying to process what I'm seeing, and I reach out to touch the ice. It's solid, cold enough that my fingers stick to it for a second when I pull back. Then I touch the sand right next to his body. It's hot, burning hot, the way desert sand gets when the sun's been on it. How long has he been like this? I asked the archaeologists, and what they told me made everything worse. The older of the two guys, Dr. something or other from the university, he's got his hands shaking as he lights a cigarette and tells me they saw the whole thing happen. He says around 7:30 that morning, they were setting up their equipment for the day's dig when they heard someone screaming out in the desert. They looked up and saw this man, Mickey Finn. They heard him yelling his own name, running toward them from the direction of the highway, stumbling and falling, getting back up, screaming at the top of his lungs that his soul was freezing, that something was freezing him from the inside out. Dr. whatever said the guy looked terrified, absolutely out of his mind with fear, and they started running toward him to help, thinking maybe he was having a heat stroke or a psychotic break. But before they could reach him, maybe 100 yards away, Mickey just stopped dead in his tracks. Stopped running, stopped screaming, just froze in place. And I mean that literally. The doctor said they heard this sound, like cracking ice on a pond, sharp and loud enough to echo across the desert, and then they watched frost form on Mickey's skin in real time. In seconds, he was covered. The guy fell forward onto the sand, and by the time they reached him, he looked exactly like he does right now, a human ice sculpture in 100-degree heat. I called it in immediately, but I knew nobody was going to believe me until they saw it themselves. I'm on my radio trying to explain the situation to dispatch, and I can hear the confusion in her voice because what I'm saying doesn't make any sense. "Dispatch, I need the coroner out here ASAP. I don't even know what I need. I got a deceased male, approximately 40 years old, and he's covered in ice. No, I'm not joking. No, I haven't been in the sun too long. Just send everybody." Within an hour, I've got 5 other deputies, 2 detectives, the county coroner, and even a fire crew out there because nobody could figure out what we were dealing with. Every single person who showed up had the same reaction I did. Complete disbelief followed by this creeping sense of dread when they realized it was real. The coroner, this old guy named Patterson who'd been doing the job for 30 years, he walked around that body 3 times without saying a word, just staring at it. Finally he looks at me and says, "Maria, in all my years, I've never seen anything like this. This isn't possible." But it was right there in front of us. We took temperatures of everything. The ice was measuring around 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The sand directly underneath the body was 96 degrees, and the air temperature was 107. The ice wasn't melting, at least not at any normal rate. In that heat, that ice should have been gone in minutes, but it was holding. They finally got the body transported, and that's when the real nightmare of trying to explain this thing began. It took us 4 hours to properly document and remove Mickey Finn's body from that desert, and by the time we got him loaded into the coroner's van, there were more questions than answers. We found his car abandoned about 2 miles up the highway, engine still running, driver's door wide open like he'd just jumped out while it was moving. His wallet was in the front seat, registration said Michael Mickey Finn, address in Henderson, Nevada, no priors, no history of mental illness according to preliminary checks. Just a regular guy who'd apparently been driving through the desert and then suddenly ran screaming into the wasteland talking about his soul freezing. The autopsy report came back 3 days later, and Patterson called me personally because he wanted me to hear it from him. Cause of death, severe hypothermia. Mickey's core body temperature when they thawed him out and got him on the table was 52 degrees Fahrenheit. 52 degrees. That's 36 degrees below normal, and Patterson told me that kind of temperature drop should take hours of exposure to sub-zero conditions. But Mickey went from running and screaming in the desert heat to frozen solid in under 2 minutes, according to the witnesses. There was no explanation for it. None. They tested for every drug they could think of, every toxin, every chemical that might cause rapid temperature loss, all negative. 20-some years later, I still think about Mickey Finn every time I drive past that stretch of desert. The case officially stayed open for about 2 years before it got filed away as unexplained death, which is basically cop speak for, we have no idea what happened and we're giving up. I really tried to find some rational explanation. I talked to meteorologists about freak weather phenomena, to chemists about endothermic reactions, to medical experts about rare conditions that might cause spontaneous hypothermia. Nothing fit. The closest anyone came to an explanation was this professor from MIT who specializes in thermodynamics. And even he just said, "What you're describing violates the second law of thermodynamics. It can't happen." But it did happen. I was there. I touched that ice with my own hands. I saw the temperature readings. The archaeological team packed up and left the area 2 days after the incident, and Dr. Whatever told me before he left that the Native Americans who originally lived in that area had legends about a spirit they called the Cold Walker, something that could steal the warmth from a person's body as punishment for trespassing on sacred ground. I'm not saying I believe in spirits or curses or any of that stuff, but I am saying that sometimes you encounter something out there that doesn't fit into the neat little boxes we try to put the world into. I requested a transfer to a different district 6 months later. Couldn't stand being out in that desert anymore. Couldn't shake the feeling that whatever took Mickey Finn was still out there, waiting. I'm retired now, but I still have nightmares about that sound the archaeologists described, that cracking, freezing sound that echoed across the sand. Some cases you solve, some cases you close, and some cases just haunt you forever. Summer of 1989, I'm Detective Marcus Jensen, and I'd been deep undercover for 18 months in this drug smuggling operation running out of Long Island City. We're talking serious weight moving through, pharmaceutical-grade stuff, pills mostly, oxy before it was everywhere, benzos, stuff that was worth more than cocaine on the street back then. My handler set me up with this fake background, got me in as muscle for their logistics front, and for a year and a half I'm loading trucks, moving pallets, keeping my head down and my eyes open, building a case that's going to take down the whole network from the suppliers in Jersey all the way to the distribution guys in the Bronx. But here's the thing nobody tells you about undercover work. You gotta have a partner on the inside, someone who's already established with the crew, and my guy was Lieutenant Frank Thorne. Not a real lieutenant, that's just what everyone called him because he ran a tight ship, you know. Former military, did 2 tours in Vietnam, came back with this ice-cold demeanor and a talent for violence that made him perfect for this line of work. When I first met Thorne, I thought he was exactly what I needed, connected, respected, brutal enough that nobody questioned him, but controlled. Professional. I figured I could work with that, use his reputation as cover while I built my case. Man, was I wrong about the controlled part. Everything started falling apart the night Thorne found out someone had been skimming from a shipment. It was a Tuesday late July, hot as hell in that warehouse we used for staging. No AC, just these big industrial fans that pushed the humid air around and made everything smell like motor oil and rust. We're doing inventory on a shipment that came in from a pharmaceutical distributor in Pennsylvania, 50,000 pills that were supposed to be headed to our street dealers, and the count's coming up short. Way short. We're missing almost $8,000 worth of merchandise, and in this business, that's the kind of mistake that gets people killed. Thorne's doing the math on his clipboard, and I can see his jaw clenching, see that vein in his temple starting to pulse the way it does when he's getting angry, and he calls everyone into the main floor. There's maybe 10 of us standing there in a semicircle, and Thorne's pacing back and forth like a drill sergeant, asking who wants to confess, who wants to make this easy. Nobody says anything, right? Because even if you didn't do it, admitting weakness in front of Thorne is a death sentence. Then this kid, Eddie Morales, maybe 22 years old, been with the crew for about 6 months. Eddie starts sweating, starts looking at his shoes, and Thorne spots it immediately. Just walks right up to him, gets in his face, and says, "You got something to tell me, Eddie?" The confession came fast, but what Thorne decided to do about it made my blood run cold. Eddie broke down right there, admitted he'd taken the pills to sell on his own because his mom needed surgery, and he didn't have the money. Some sob story that might have gotten him a beating and a debt to work off under normal circumstances. But Thorne just smiled. Not a happy smile, not even an angry smile. It was this calm, satisfied smile like he'd just solved a puzzle he'd been working on. He tells two of the bigger guys to grab Eddie, tie him up, and they drag this kid, who's crying now, begging, saying he'll pay it back double. They drag him to the back of the warehouse where we keep the construction equipment. See, the front company wasn't just for show. We actually did some legitimate concrete work as cover for the smuggling operation, had mixers and forms and all that stuff. Thorne orders them to fire up the big industrial mixer, the kind that holds about 300 gallons of concrete slurry. And while it's warming up, he's explaining to all of us what's about to happen. He says Eddie's gonna get baptized in the river Styx before he goes down to the lower circles of hell. Thorne was always saying weird literary shit like that. Thought it made him sound educated or something. But I knew what he meant, and I realized with this sick feeling in my gut that Thorne was planning to drown this kid in wet concrete. I joined the force to stop people like Thorne, not to stand by and watch them commit murder. My whole reason for becoming a cop, for volunteering for undercover work, was because I grew up in a neighborhood where guys like Thorne ran everything. I watched good people get crushed by corruption and violence, watched cops look the other way because they were either scared or paid off, and I promised myself I'd be different. I'd be one of the good ones. But standing there in that warehouse, watching Thorne supervise while they mixed the concrete and positioned Eddie next to the vat, I felt that promise slipping away. I'd already compromised so much to maintain my cover. I'd watched beatings, I'd helped move drugs, I'd done things that kept me awake at night. But this was premeditated murder, and it was happening in slow motion, right in front of me. Eddie was tied to a chair now, still crying, and Thorne was lecturing him about loyalty and consequences, talking about how in the old days they used to put traitors in barrels of cement and drop them in the East River. The concrete mixer was churning, making this low grinding sound, and I could smell that chemical smell of wet cement. I had my piece on me, a snub-nose .38 I kept in an ankle holster, and I'm running through scenarios in my head. If I blow my cover now, I lose 18 months of work. The whole case collapses. But if I don't, I'm an accessory to murder. When Thorne grabbed Eddie to push him toward that mixer, I made a choice that ended my undercover career, but saved my soul. Everything happened fast after that. Thorne and another guy, big Russian dude named Dmitri, they're lifting Eddie's chair, carrying him toward the concrete vat, and Eddie's screaming so loud his voice is cracking, and I pulled my gun. Didn't think about it, didn't plan it, just drew my .38 and pointed it straight at Thorne's head. "Put him down, Styx," I said, using the nickname the crew had given Thorne. My voice sounded weird in my own ears, too calm, too steady. "Put him down right now, or I put you down." The whole warehouse went silent except for the mixer. Thorne turned around slowly, still holding one end of Eddie's chair, and his face went through about 5 different emotions: confusion, anger, betrayal, fear, and finally this cold calculation. He said, "Marcus, what are you doing? We talked about this, about discipline, about..." And I cut him off. "I'm Detective Marcus Jensen, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, drug trafficking, and about 20 other charges I'm going to enjoy reading to you." I'll never forget the look on his face when I said that. It was like watching someone's whole reality collapse. Dmitri let go of the chair and put his hands up immediately. Smart guy. But Thorne just stood there holding Eddie, staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. The takedown happened within minutes, but the fallout from that night followed me for the rest of my career. I'd triggered my emergency signal before I drew my weapon, just pressed the panic button on the pager my handlers gave me, and SWAT was staged 3 blocks away specifically for situations like this. They came through the doors maybe 4 minutes after I pulled my gun, and in that time I had to keep 10 guys at gunpoint while they decided whether to rush me or comply. Thorne never moved, just kept staring at me with this look of absolute betrayal, like I'd wounded him personally by not letting him commit murder. They arrested everyone, shut down the whole operation, and Eddie Morales ended up testifying in exchange for immunity. The case made headlines for about a week. FBI agent breaks major drug ring. And I got a commendation and a desk assignment in the Albany field office because I couldn't work undercover in New York anymore. Every criminal in the 5 boroughs knew my face after the trial. But here's what the newspapers didn't cover. I couldn't sleep for 2 years after that night. Not because I regretted stopping Thorne. I'd do that again in a heartbeat, but because I kept thinking about all the things I'd let happen to maintain my cover before Eddie. How many people got hurt while I was building my case? How many crimes did I witness and do nothing about? I saved one life that night, and I'm proud of that, but I wonder sometimes if the math works out in my favor when you add up all the collateral damage from those 18 months. I'm retired now, been out of the bureau for 15 years, but I still think about Thorne. He's serving life without parole in Attica, and good riddance. But that smile when he ordered up the concrete mixer? That's the image that haunts me. The moment I realized my partner wasn't just a criminal, he was a monster, and I'd been working alongside him for a year and a half. March 2024, early morning shift, and I'm about 2 hours away from clocking out after pulling a double because Jenkins called in sick, again. I'm Maria Sanchez, been a paramedic with County EMS for 6 years, seen pretty much everything you can see on these rural routes. Overdoses, farm accidents, heart attacks, the occasional crazy stuff like a guy who got his arm stuck in a wood chipper. You do this job long enough, you think you've developed this sixth sense about danger, you know? Like you can tell when a scene isn't safe, when something's off. But that morning, man, I had nothing. No warning bells, no bad feelings, just another call coming through dispatch at 6 a.m. about a single vehicle accident out on Route 47, near the old Miller farm. Pickup truck rolled over into the ditch, driver reportedly conscious and alert, but possibly in shock. Standard stuff. My partner that shift was Officer Mike Harris, county sheriff's deputy, who usually rode along on our calls in the rural areas for security. And we're heading out there in the ambulance. Mike's drinking his 4th coffee of the night, and I'm thinking about whether I'm going to stop at Denny's on the way home, or just crash as soon as I get in my door. The sun's just starting to come up, that weird gray light where you can see but everything looks washed out and surreal, and we pull up to the scene. The truck was on its side in the ditch, and this tall guy was just standing there, perfectly still, staring at nothing. We park about 30 feet back from the wreck, standard protocol, leave room for fire if they need to come in. And Mike gets out first, hand on his radio, doing the whole assessment thing where he's looking for hazards, checking if there are other vehicles involved, that routine. I grab my jump bag and start walking toward the victim, and that's when I get my first good look at him. Jonathan Knox, though I didn't know his name yet, probably 6'2", 6'3", really thin, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt that's torn at the shoulder. His truck's pretty mangled, front end completely smashed in, windshield spiderwebbed, the whole passenger side caved in from the roll. But he's just standing there on the shoulder like he's waiting for a bus. Not pacing, not on his phone, not checking the damage to his vehicle, just standing. His hands are at his sides, and he's staring off toward the tree line with this blank expression on his face. I've seen shock before, seen people dissociate after accidents, so I'm not immediately alarmed. I walk up with my hands visible, doing the friendly paramedic thing, and I say, "Hey there, I'm Maria, I'm with County EMS. Can you tell me your name? Are you hurt anywhere?" He doesn't respond, doesn't even look at me. Just keeps staring at those trees. Mike's behind me now, checking out the truck, and I can hear him radioing in the vehicle information, running the plates. I should have listened to that tiny voice in my head that said something was wrong with this guy. I move closer, trying to get into his line of sight, and I notice his pupils. They're huge, blown out completely, even though the sun's getting brighter. Could be a concussion, could be drugs, could be a lot of things. I pull out my pen light and say, "Sir, I need to check your eyes real quick, make sure you didn't hit your head. Just look at me for a second." That's when he finally moves. He turns his head, not his whole body, just his head, real slow like something out of a horror movie. And he looks right at me. And his eyes, man, they're not right. I've looked into a lot of eyes in this job, scared eyes, angry eyes, dying eyes, but Knox's eyes were empty. Like nobody was home behind them. But I'm a professional, right? I've got a job to do. So I step closer and I crouch down a little to get at his eye level, and I'm raising my pen light, about to check his pupil response, when his hand shoots out faster than I've ever seen anyone move. He's got something in his fist. I don't even register what it is at first, and he drives it into my left shoulder, right above my collarbone. The pain is instant and electric, like someone plugged me into a wall socket, and I stumble backwards, and that's when I see it. He's holding a rusty screwdriver, one of those flathead ones with the orange handle. and there's blood on it now. My blood. I try to scream, but nothing comes out except this weird choking sound. Mike saw it happen, but by the time he reacted, Knox was already moving toward the ambulance. Everything after that first stab is kind of fragmented in my memory, like my brain couldn't process it all at once, so it filed it away in these disconnected snapshots. I remember falling to one knee and grabbing my shoulder, feeling the hot blood running down inside my shirt. I remember Mike yelling something. "Get down. Get on the ground." And I hear his footsteps running toward us. But Knox doesn't go for Mike, doesn't even acknowledge him. He just turns and sprints, and I mean sprints like an Olympic runner, toward our ambulance. Mike's got his service weapon out now, he's shouting commands, but Knox is already at the driver's door, yanking it open. I'm still on the ground, trying to put pressure on my shoulder with my right hand, and I'm watching this happen like it's a movie, like it's not real. Knox jumps into the driver's seat, and I remember thinking he's gonna drive away, he's gonna steal the ambulance, and that'll be it. But then I hear the engine roar, and the wheels spin in the gravel, and instead of going forward onto the road, he cranks the wheel hard, and the ambulance lurches toward me. I try to roll out of the way, but I'm dizzy from the blood loss and the shock, and the passenger door, which I'd left open when I got out. That door catches me, hits me in the hip, and knocks me flat. The next 30 seconds were the longest and most terrifying of my entire life. So now I'm on the ground on my back, and somehow, I still don't understand the physics of how this happened. Somehow my EMS vest got caught on something in the door frame, maybe the seatbelt mechanism or the handle, I don't know. And Knox is driving. He's driving the ambulance down the shoulder of Route 47, accelerating, and I'm being dragged alongside it. The gravel is tearing through my uniform pants, ripping up my legs, and I'm screaming now, really screaming, trying to grab onto something, anything, to pull myself up or tear myself free. I can see Knox's face through the open door, and he's looking down at me while he's driving, and he's smiling. Not laughing, not making any sound, just smiling this calm, satisfied smile like he's enjoying watching me get dragged to death. Mike is chasing us on foot. I can hear him yelling, but he's falling behind because Knox is doing maybe 30 miles an hour now. My vest finally tears, and I hit the ground hard, rolling through the gravel and coming to a stop in the middle of the road. I'm pretty sure I broke some ribs in that fall, and the wind is completely knocked out of me, so I'm just lying there gasping like a fish, tasting blood in my mouth, watching the ambulance, my ambulance, drive away with that psychopath behind the wheel. They found the ambulance 3 hours later, abandoned in a Walmart parking lot, but Knox vanished like smoke. Mike ran back to his patrol car and put out an immediate APB while I was still lying in the road trying to breathe. Fire department arrived maybe 5 minutes later, and they worked on me right there on the pavement. Started in 4, packed my shoulder wound, stabilized my spine because they weren't sure what else was injured from the dragging. I ended up in surgery that afternoon for the shoulder, had to have the wound cleaned out because that screwdriver was covered in God knows what, rust and dirt and tetanus waiting to happen. 16 stitches inside, 22 outside, plus they had to do a course of heavy antibiotics because the blade had nicked something near a nerve cluster. Knox's truck came back stolen. He'd carjacked it from a guy in the next county over the night before. They found my ambulance in a Walmart lot about 40 miles away, completely trashed inside. He'd torn out all the medical equipment, stolen the drugs from the locked cabinet, smashed the radio and the GPS. But no sign of Knox himself. He's still out there somewhere as far as I know. Never caught him. I was in physical therapy for 7 months, and I've got permanent nerve damage in my left shoulder. Can't lift my arm above my head anymore without pain. But the physical stuff? That healed eventually. The psychological stuff, the nightmares where I'm being dragged, and I can see his face smiling down at me. That's what made me quit. I handed in my resignation 4 months after the attack. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't pull up to accident scenes without my hands shaking. Couldn't approach anyone without wondering if they had a weapon hidden. The job asks you to trust people, to get close to them, to help them even when they're at their worst. And I can't do that anymore. Knox took that from me. Took my career, took my sense of safety, took the person I used to be. Some nights I wake up and I can still feel that screwdriver going into my shoulder, still see those empty eyes looking down at me. And I wonder where he is now, and whether he's hurt anyone else, and whether I'll ever really escape that morning on Route 47. I'm Detective John Barnes, 23 years with the Denver PD, and I thought I'd seen it all by the time I hit my 40s. Gang shootouts, hostage situations, found a dead kid in a dumpster once. That kind of stuff changes you, hardens you, Makes you think you're bulletproof in a weird psychological way. Not that you can't die, but that you've survived so much already that you must be doing something right, you know? So when we got the warrant to raid this house on the east side, suspected meth lab, neighbors complaining about chemical smells, the whole 9 yards, I volunteered to lead the entry team. Standard dynamic entry, 6 of us in full tactical gear, vests, helmets, the works. We briefed at 0600, went over the floor plans we'd gotten from the county assessor, identified the likely cooking area in the basement, and rolled out just after 7 in the morning, because that's when tweakers are usually crashed out and less likely to put up a fight. The house was this rundown 2-story thing with brown siding that was peeling off in strips, dead grass in the yard, windows covered with aluminum foil and blankets. Classic meth house. We stacked up at the front door. I gave the countdown 3, 2, 1, and I put my boot right through the door frame. The lock splintered, the door swung open, and that's when everything went sideways in a way I never could have prepared for. Standing right there in the living room was this kid, maybe 25 years old, holding a red plastic gas can in both hands. His name was Derek Stone, though I didn't know that yet, just saw this skinny white guy in a stained tank top and boxer shorts, barefoot, with these wild eyes that weren't high wild or angry wild, they were terrified wild. Like a cornered animal that knows it's about to die. The whole room reeked of gasoline, that sharp chemical smell that burns your nostrils, and I could see it. The floor was wet with it. There were puddles of gas all over the hardwood, and Derek's holding this can that's clearly been emptied all over the place. Everything slowed down in that moment. You know how people always say that? It's true, man. It really does slow down when your brain realizes you might be about to die. I see Derek's left hand move, still holding the gas can with his right, and he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a blue Bic lighter. A fucking 99-cent convenience store lighter. And in that split second, I understand exactly what's about to happen. He's gonna light this place up with all of us inside, and there's gasoline everywhere, probably meth chemicals in the basement, and we're about to become a fireball. My team behind me is yelling, "Drop it! Drop the lighter! Get on the ground!" But I can see in Derek's eyes that he's already made his decision. He's not dropping anything. He's gonna take us all with him. I watched his thumb press down on that lighter wheel, and I swear to God, time completely stopped. Click. The first strike of the lighter, and I see the wheel spin, see the little sparks it makes, but no flame. My heart is hammering so hard I can feel it in my throat, in my ears, and I'm frozen, not because I'm scared, but because my brain is processing faster than my body can move. If that lighter catches, we've got maybe half a second before the gas fumes ignite. Not even enough time to turn and run. We're dead. All 6 of us. I think about my wife, Sarah, about my daughter, Emily, who just started college, about how they're going to get that knock on the door from my captain, and I think about how stupid it is that I'm going to die because of a 99-cent lighter in the hands of some meth cook who's probably been up for 6 days straight. Click. Second strike. Still no flame. The mechanism's wet or clogged, or maybe God himself is intervening. I don't know, and I don't care in that moment. I just know that I've been given about 3 seconds to do something, and my body finally catches up to my brain. I launch myself forward, diving across that gasoline-soaked floor like I'm sliding into home plate, and I hit Derek's center mass with my shoulder. We both go down hard. His head bounces off the floor with this sick thud, and the gas can goes flying across the room, spilling the last few ounces that were still in it. The lighter skittered across the floor, and we all just stared at it, lying there in a puddle of gasoline not lit. Everything erupted into chaos after that. My team rushed in, grabbed Derek, got him in cuffs while he's screaming. Not words, just this high-pitched wailing sound like an animal caught in a trap. Someone's dragging me backwards out of the house, out onto the front lawn, because I'm covered in gasoline from diving across that floor, and protocol is to get anyone contaminated away from potential ignition sources. Fire department showed up maybe 2 minutes later, started ventilating the house, and hazmat came in to clear the scene. Turned out Derek had been cooking meth for 3 days straight, hadn't slept, was completely paranoid, and convinced we were going to kill him when we came through that door. So his plan was to take us with him, go out in a blaze of glory, or whatever was going through his fried brain. They found enough volatile chemicals in that basement to level half the block if it had gone up. The lighter? Crime scene techs bagged it as evidence, and later they told me the flint wheel was gummed up with pocket lint, and the fuel reservoir was nearly empty. If Derek had checked his lighter before we breached, if he'd had a fresh one, if he'd flicked it one more time and gotten lucky, none of us would be here. We processed Derek, wrote up the reports, and everyone went home that night except me because I physically couldn't. Back at the station, sitting at my desk trying to fill out the incident report, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not like a little tremor. I mean full-on shaking like I was freezing to death, even though it was probably 75 degrees in the building. I tried to write, and the pen just scratched across the paper in these jagged lines because I couldn't control my grip. Someone brought me a cup of water, and I picked it up and immediately dumped it all over my desk because my hand was jerking so bad. And my right leg, Jesus Christ, my right leg started bouncing up and down like a jackhammer, just rapid-fire bouncing that I couldn't stop no matter how hard I tried. It would slow down for a few seconds and then start up again, completely involuntary. The department physician, Dr. Reeves, came down to check on me, took my vitals. Blood pressure was through the roof, heart rate was still at like 140. And he said I was experiencing what they call static shock, or acute stress reaction. Basically, my body had dumped so much adrenaline and cortisol into my system during that near-death experience that my nervous system was misfiring, couldn't regulate itself. He said it would pass, but I needed to go home, take the next few days off, maybe talk to the department psychologist. 23 years on the job, and it took a faulty lighter to show me how randomly death picks its targets. I did talk to the psychologist eventually, after about 2 months of not sleeping right, of waking up in cold sweats, of avoiding gas stations because the smell made me nauseous. She helped, I guess, as much as therapy can help with something like that. But here's what really messed me up, what I still think about all the time. It was random. There was no skill involved in my survival that day, no training that saved me. It was a mechanical failure of a 99-cent lighter. If Derek had bought a different lighter, if the weather had been drier, if he'd cleaned his pocket out that morning, I'd be dead. My whole team would be dead. And that randomness, that complete lack of control over whether you live or die, that's what haunts you. I put in my retirement papers 6 months after the incident. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't walk into situations knowing that my survival might come down to whether some meth head's lighter works or not. People say I had a good career, that I served with honor, and maybe that's true. But I also know I used up all my luck on that one morning in a house on the east side, and I wasn't going to push it any further. Derek Stone got 15 years for attempted murder of a police officer, manufacturing controlled substances, and a bunch of other charges. He'll be out in maybe 10 with good behavior. And I'll still be here, hearing that click-click-click sound in my head, seeing that little spark that never caught, living with the knowledge that I'm only alive because of a mechanical failure. Some guys get medals for heroism. I got a psych evaluation and early retirement. And you know what? I'm fine with that. I'm alive. My family still has a husband and a father. That's more than a lot of cops get. That's more than I deserved that morning when I kicked down that door. There are some things you do in life that you can never take back, and leaving that man in the mud to die is mine. September 2023, late afternoon shift, and I'm Officer Dave Warren, 15 years with the Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Office down in Louisiana Bayou Country. My partner that day was Tommy Fraser, known him since the academy, worked with him on and off for over a decade, and by that point, man, we were both burned out, completely fried. You spend 15 years dealing with the absolute worst of humanity. Domestics where people carve each other up over a TV remote, drug busts where kids are living in houses filled with needles and cockroaches, pulling bodies out of car wrecks where you can't tell where the person ends and the dashboard begins. It does something to you, changes you, makes you hard in ways that aren't healthy. We used to joke that we'd seen so much evil we were inoculated against it, immune to being shocked or horrified. But really what happened was we stopped caring. Stopped seeing people as people and started seeing them as just problems to solve, reports to file, boxes to check so we could go home. That's the poison they don't warn you about in training. Not the danger, not the violence, but the slow erosion of your humanity until you're just going through the motions and counting down to retirement. So when dispatch called us around 5:30 that evening about an injured man out in the swamp near Bayou Black, reported by some fishermen who'd heard screaming, Tommy and I both groaned. End of shift was 6:30, and swamp calls were always a nightmare, muddy, hot, mosquitoes everywhere, usually turned out to be nothing anyway. We found Louis Dubois half submerged in black water, his leg torn open so bad I could see bone, and I felt nothing. We took our time getting out there, didn't rush, stopped at a gas station so Tommy could grab a Red Bull, finally rolled up to the access point around 6 p.m. The fisherman who'd called it in, older Cajun guy, probably 70s, he's waiting there all agitated, pointing toward the tree line, saying there's a man back in there who got attacked by a gator, bad hurt, needs help right away. Tommy and I exchanged this look, this tired, annoyed look like, of course it's a gator attack on our last hour. And we grab our flashlights even though there's still some daylight left, and we start walking back into the swamp. It's that thick Louisiana mud that sucks at your boots with every step, cypress trees everywhere dripping with Spanish moss, and the smell, that swamp smell of decay and stagnant water and rot. We're maybe 200 yards in when we hear him, this weak groaning sound, and we push through some palmetto bushes, and there he is. Louis Dubois, though we didn't know his name yet, 50 years old, lying in the mud at the edge of this murky channel, and his left leg is destroyed. Just absolutely mangled from mid-thigh down, deep lacerations, chunks of flesh missing, blood everywhere mixing with the black swamp water. A gator had gotten him good, probably a big one judging from the bite pattern. And he's conscious, barely, looking up at us with these pleading eyes, trying to talk but only managing these gurgling sounds because he's aspirating blood or swamp water or both. I looked at Tommy, and without saying a word, we both decided this man wasn't worth our time. Here's the part I'm ashamed of, the part that keeps me up at night, the part that destroyed whatever was left of my soul. I didn't want to deal with it. Dubois was covered in mud and blood, half in the water, probably weighed 220, 230, and getting him out of there meant carrying him 200 yards through that sucking mud back to our vehicle. Meant getting covered in his blood and God knows what diseases. Meant staying late to deal with EMS and reports and probably the parish coroner. And I just didn't want to. I looked at Tommy and said, "Man, I am not dragging this guy out of this mud. Shift ends in 30 minutes. And Tommy, he just nodded, looked relieved that I'd said it first, and goes, "Yeah, screw this. Let's take a lap, come back in a bit. He's not going anywhere." And we laughed. I swear to God, we actually laughed about it. Made some joke about gator food or something equally disgusting. Dubois was right there, maybe 15 feet away, watching us, and I could see in his eyes that he understood what we were saying, understood that we were leaving him. He tried to reach out with one hand, tried to say something, but we just turned around and walked back through the swamp to our vehicle. Told the fishermen we couldn't find anybody. Maybe the guy had crawled off somewhere. We'd come back with more personnel to do a proper search. We drove around for 20 minutes, grabbed drive-through food, and when we came back, Officer Miller had already found him. We figured we'd give it about 20, 25 minutes, let it get a little darker, then go back and discover Dubois and call it in like we'd just found him. That way it wouldn't look like we'd delayed. We could say the swamp was hard to search, took us a while to locate the victim, whatever. So we're sitting in the parking lot of a Popeyes, eating chicken sandwiches and talking about football, and neither of us is mentioning the man dying in the swamp a mile away. That's how far gone we were. We could compartmentalize it completely, just shove it into a box in our heads and pretend it wasn't happening. Finally we head back to the access point, and there's another patrol car there, and my stomach just drops. Officer Jesse Miller, this young guy maybe 3 years on the job, still had that shine to him, that belief that he was making a difference. He'd heard the call on the radio, was in the area, decided to check it out. And he'd found Dubois. Miller's on his radio screaming for EMS, for fire rescue, for an air ambulance, saying we've got a critical injury, massive blood loss, victim unresponsive. And he sees us walking up and goes, "Warren. Fraser. Thank God, I need help carrying him out. Where the hell have you been?" We played it off like we'd been searching a different area, but I could see in Miller's eyes that he didn't believe us. We helped Miller carry Dubois out, took all three of us, and it was just as awful as I'd imagined, slipping in the mud, his blood soaking into my uniform, his breathing getting shallower with every step, and by the time we got him to the access point, EMS was rolling up. They loaded him into the ambulance, started working on him, IVs, pressure bandages, the whole deal, and the lead paramedic looks at his watch and then looks at me and says, "When did you guys find him?" And I lied. Told him we just found him about 10 minutes ago. But Miller's standing right there, and he says, "Wait, didn't you guys respond to this call at 5:30? That was over an hour ago." And suddenly everyone's looking at me and Tommy, and the paramedic's face changes, gets this horrified expression, and he says, "You mean this man's been lying out here bleeding for over an hour and nobody called us until now?" The ambulance took off, lights and sirens, and Miller pulled us aside and asked point blank what had happened, where we'd been, and I tried to stick to the story, but I'm a terrible liar when I'm under pressure. Eventually Tommy just said, "Look, we found him earlier, but it was end of shift. We didn't want to deal with it. We left and came back." Just said it straight out. and Miller looked at us like we were aliens, like he couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. Louis Dubois died on the operating table at Our Lady of the Sea, and the surgeon said 15 minutes earlier might have saved him. Internal Affairs showed up at my house the next morning at 6 a.m., badges and recording equipment, and they took my statement while I was still in my bathrobe. Tommy got the same treatment. Miller had reported us immediately after the incident, and the EMS crew had documented that Dubois had a thready pulse when they arrived, meaning he'd still been alive when we first found him over an hour earlier. The surgeon who worked on him, Dr. Pham, she wrote in her report that the victim had died from hypovolemic shock due to massive blood loss, and that the delay in treatment was a contributing factor to his death. Her exact words in the incident review were, "If this patient had reached our facility even 20 minutes sooner, his prognosis would have been significantly improved." 20 minutes. That's how long Tommy and I sat in a Popeyes parking lot. The sheriff fired us both within a week, no hearing, no appeal, just terminated for gross dereliction of duty and conduct unbecoming. Our post-certifications got revoked, which means we can never work in law enforcement again anywhere in the United States. Dubois's mother, he wasn't married, no kids, just an elderly mother who lived in Homa. She tried to sue the department, sue us personally, but qualified immunity protected us from the civil suit. Didn't protect us from the criminal investigation, though. DA considered charging us with negligent homicide, but ultimately decided he couldn't prove beyond reasonable doubt that our delay directly caused the death. So we walked, legally speaking, but everyone knew. The story made the local news, made some of the state papers, and our names got dragged through the mud worse than we dragged Louis Dubois through that swamp. I lost my pension, lost my marriage. My wife left me 6 months later, said she didn't know who I was anymore, lost my house, lost pretty much everything. I work at a tire shop now, changing oil and rotating tires for minimum wage. And every single night, I see Louis Dubois's face looking up at me from that mud, see his hand reaching out while I turned and walked away. People ask me if I'd do it differently if I could go back, and the honest answer is I don't know. That's what scares me the most. I don't know if I'd make a different choice. The poison had gotten that deep. The worst part wasn't finding that stuff in my car. It was realizing someone had been watching us the entire time. Early morning hours, maybe 2:30, 3 a.m., middle of nowhere, Georgia, and I'm Officer Christine Hayes, been working county patrol for about 8 years at this point. My partner that night was Officer Danny Lewis, good guy, solid cop, father of 3, the kind of guy who actually gave a damn about the community. We get this call from dispatch about a disturbance at an old tobacco barn out on Millwood Road. Property owner called in saying he was driving past his land around midnight and saw weird flickering lights coming from inside the barn, like candles or lanterns, and he didn't want to check it out himself because the place had been abandoned for probably 20 years, and honestly, who knows what kind of squatters or tweakers might be holed up in there. So Danny and I were the lucky ones on night shift, and we head out there thinking it's probably just some kids messing around, maybe doing some kind of teenage occult thing they saw on TikTok, or maybe it's homeless folks trying to stay warm. The drive out there is long, down these back roads where your headlights are the only light for miles, nothing but pine trees, and the occasional trailer with a porch light. We finally turn onto this dirt access road, and we can see the barn silhouetted against the night sky. Big old wooden structure, roof half caved in, gaps in the walls where the boards have rotted away. We kill the headlights about 100 yards out and approach on foot with our flashlights, standard procedure for checking potentially occupied structures at night. The silence when we got close to that barn was wrong, not peaceful quiet, but the kind of silence where everything living has stopped making noise. Danny's on my left as we're walking up, and I remember he whispers to me, "You hear that?" And I say, "Hear what?" Because I don't hear anything at all, and that's what he means. No crickets, no frogs, no night birds, nothing. Just this dead silence, and the wind moving through the pine trees making this low moaning sound. The barn door is hanging open on one hinge, swaying slightly, and I can see a faint orange glow from inside, like candlelight, just like the property owner said. We announce ourselves, Sheriff's Department, anyone in there, make yourself known. But there's no response. Danny covers me while I push the door open wider with my boot, and we shine our lights inside, and Jesus Christ, the scene in there was something out of a horror movie. There must have been 50, 60 candles arranged in these perfect circles all over the dirt floor, most of them still burning, wax pooled around them. And drawn between the circles, connecting them, were these symbols, not like pentagrams or anything I recognized from movies, but primitive-looking marks, spirals and angular shapes drawn with what looked like mud or clay. But the smell, man, the smell was what got me first. It was this overwhelming stench of rot and human waste, and when I moved my flashlight beam across the walls, I could see smears of feces, actual human shit, used like paint to draw more symbols on the wooden beams. We cleared the barn, nobody there, completely empty except for the candles and the symbols, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Standard procedure, we do a full sweep of the building, check the loft area, make sure there's no one hiding in the shadows or behind the old farming equipment that's still scattered around. Nothing. Not a soul. Just these candles burning, and these disturbing symbols everywhere, and that horrible smell. Danny's taking photos with his phone for evidence, and I'm marking the scene, and we're both trying to act professional and not let on how creeped out we are, but I can tell he's feeling it too. That sensation on the back of your neck like someone's staring at you. I keep turning around expecting to see someone standing there, but it's always just empty space and shadows. We figure whoever was doing this ritual, or whatever the hell it was, must have heard us coming and taken off into the woods. So we call it in, request animal control because the property owner's gonna want this cleaned up, and we head back to our patrol car. The walk back feels longer than the walk there, and I've got my hand on my service weapon the whole time, just this irrational feeling that something's not right. We get to the car, which we'd parked about 100 yards down the access road, and Danny goes around to the passenger side while I'm heading for the driver's door, and I open it up and my flashlight beam hits the seat, and I just freeze. My driver's seat was completely covered in this thick, dark liquid that smelled like death and stagnant water mixed together. It was everywhere, soaked into the fabric, pooling in the seat cushion, dripping down onto the floor mat. Dark reddish-brown color, almost black in the dim light, and cold to the touch when I stupidly reached out and put my finger in it without thinking. The smell hit me a second later, made me gag, swamp water, decay, and underneath that, the unmistakable copper smell of blood. Old blood, coagulated blood. And there's more of it smeared on the steering wheel, on the dashboard, and that's when I see the note. It's a piece of torn paper, looks like it came from a spiral notebook, stuck under the windshield wiper, and written on it in shaky handwriting with what looks like charcoal, or maybe more of that mud. You drove past the sacrifice. Danny comes around to my side, sees what I'm looking at, and his face goes white. "Chris," he says, and his voice is shaking. "We've been here for maybe 20 minutes. Someone did this while we were in that barn." And that's when it really hits me, the terror of it. Someone had been watching us pull up, had watched us walk to the barn, had waited until we were inside searching around like idiots, and then had calmly walked up to our vehicle, had time to pour this disgusting liquid all over my seat, smear it on the steering wheel, write a note, and disappear into the darkness without making a sound. Without us hearing them, without us seeing them. We called for backup immediately, but the real horror was understanding how vulnerable we'd been without knowing it. I'm on the radio calling this in, my hand shaking so bad I can barely hold the mic, telling dispatch we've got a contaminated vehicle and a threatening note. We need backup and probably a supervisor out here right now. Danny's scanning the tree line with his flashlight, service weapon drawn, doing 360 turns because we both know whoever did this could still be out there watching us at that exact moment. Could be 50 feet away in those trees with a rifle pointed at us. Could be recording us on their phone. Could be doing anything, and we'd have no idea. The property owner's house is 2 miles away. There are no other structures around. No cars passed us on the road coming in. Whoever did this either walked in from the main road, which is a hell of a hike, or they were already here waiting when we arrived. Backup showed up about 15 minutes later. Felt like an hour. 2 more patrol units and a sergeant, and they set up a perimeter, did a sweep of the woods with K9, and found nothing. Not a footprint, not a cigarette, but nothing. The county sent out a crime scene tech who collected samples of the liquid from my seat. Preliminary field test showed it was a mixture of blood, consistent with human blood, mixed with what appeared to be swamp or pond water, and some kind of organic material they couldn't immediately identify. They towed my patrol car for evidence processing, and I had to ride back to the station with Danny. 3 weeks later, forensics confirmed it was human blood mixed with marsh water, but they never found who did it or whose blood it was. The DNA from the blood didn't match anyone in CODIS, the National Criminal Database, so whoever's blood it was, they'd never been arrested before, or the victim was never reported missing, or God knows what. The phrase on the note, "You drove past the sacrifice," kept me up at night for months. What sacrifice? Did we literally drive past a body on our way to that barn and not see it in the dark? Did they mean a sacrifice they were planning to make? Were we supposed to be the sacrifice? The barn got torn down by the property owner about a week after the incident. He hired a crew, had the whole thing demolished and burned, said he didn't want whatever evil had been in there to stay on his land. I talked to him before they tore it down, asked him some questions, and he told me his grandfather used to tell stories about that barn being used for lynchings back in the 20s and 30s, that bad things had happened there long before any of this occult stuff. Said his family had always avoided the place, never used it for storage or anything, just let it rot. Made me wonder if whoever was doing those rituals knew the history, if they'd chosen that location specifically because of what had happened there decades ago. Danny transferred to day shift about 2 months after the incident, couldn't handle night patrol anymore, couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I stuck it out for another year before I requested a transfer to dispatch. I still work for the department, but I don't go on patrol anymore, can't do it. Every time I'm in a patrol car, I think about opening that door and finding that seat covered in blood and swamp water. Every time I respond to a call about suspicious activity in a remote location, I think about how someone was out there in the darkness watching me, close enough to touch my vehicle, close enough to kill me if they'd wanted to, and I never knew they were there. That's the kind of terror that doesn't go away. Not the jump scare terror of something violent happening, but the slow, creeping realization that you were never in control, that you were being hunted, and you didn't even know it until it was too late. Tentar novameni. I've seen cartel violence before, bodies in barrels, mass graves, executions, but nothing prepared me for what I found in that little pink playhouse. My name's Agent Ryan Matthews, 12 years with the DEA, and by 2019 I thought I'd seen every flavor of evil the cartels could dish out. Been working the Southwest Corridor tracking Los Zetas, Sinaloa, Gulf cartel operations, done undercover buys, participated in raids that pulled tons of product off the streets. The violence in this line of work is constant. You get desensitized to crime scene photos, to intercepted videos of torture, to informants showing up in pieces. But this case, man, this one was different from the jump. We'd been tracking a mid-level operator who went by El Demonio. The Demon, real name Carlos Vega, ran a distribution network out of Phoenix that moved fentanyl and heroin into the Midwest. Nasty piece of work, but not the worst we'd dealt with until he escalated things by going after families. See, there'd been a power struggle within his organization. One of his lieutenants named Ricky Harper had tried to break off and start his own operation, and in the ensuing conflict, Ricky's brother got killed. So El Demonio decided to send a message the way these guys do. He took something Ricky loved. He took Ricky's 6-year-old daughter, Lily Harper. Just snatched her right out of her grandmother's front yard in Glendale on a Tuesday afternoon, threw her in a van, and disappeared. That was when this stopped being just another cartel case and became something personal for everyone involved. We had 48 hours to find her before the intelligence suggested they'd kill her, and we were running out of leads fast. The task force, FBI, DEA, local PD, everybody, we threw everything at this. Informants, wiretaps, traffic cameras, cell tower dumps, you name it. Ricky Harper was cooperating fully, begging us to find his little girl, giving up information on El Demonio's operation that he'd never have shared otherwise. We finally caught a break on day 2, when one of our CIs overheard something at a stash house about a special package being held at a location in Surprise, Arizona, which is this suburban community northwest of Phoenix, all tract homes and retirement communities. Not the kind of place you'd expect to find a cartel-safe house, which is exactly why they used it. We got a probable address from cell phone pings. One of El Demonio's enforcers, guy named Hank Robles, his phone had been stationary at this one house for almost 36 hours straight, which was unusual for him. Normally these guys are mobile, moving around, but Hank was just sitting there. We ran the address, and it came back to a rental property, recently leased under a shell company we'd seen the cartel use before. That was enough for a warrant. We assembled a tactical team, 6 agents including me, full gear, ready to do a dynamic entry, and we rolled out there around 4 in the afternoon, broad daylight, because we didn't have time to wait for darkness, and we figured the suburban setting would keep things from getting too crazy. We were wrong about that last part. The house looked like every other house on the street, beige stucco, 2-car garage, kids' bikes in neighboring yards, which made what we found even worse. We staged 2 blocks away, got our briefing, confirmed that thermal imaging showed at least 2 heat signatures inside the residence, and moved in. Standard breach, flashbangs through the windows, front door kicked in, federal agents, search warrant. The whole 9 yards. We cleared the main house in maybe 90 seconds. Living room, kitchen, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. And found one guy, not Hank, some low-level lookout who gave up immediately, told us Hank was out back with the girl. Those words, man, they hit different when you're talking about a 6-year-old. We zip-tied the lookout and moved toward the back door, and I'm stacked up behind 2 other agents, and we flow out into this completely normal suburban backyard. There's a Weber grill on the patio, some dead grass, a wooden fence, and in the far corner of the yard, there's one of those plastic playhouses you can buy at Walmart or Target, the kind that's shaped like a little cottage with a door and windows, bright pink with a yellow roof. And I can hear sounds coming from inside it, a man's voice, low and calm, talking to someone. We approach with weapons raised, and one of the agents yanks open the little plastic door, and the scene inside that playhouse is something that's going to be burned into my brain until the day I die. Lily Harper was tied to a child-sized plastic chair with duct tape, and Hank was standing over her with a hammer and a rusty hacksaw laid out on a Fisher-Price table. The contrast was what made it so horrifying. This cheerful pink plastic interior with little decals of flowers and butterflies on the walls, and in the middle of it, this little girl bound and gagged with silver duct tape, wearing the same clothes she'd been kidnapped in 2 days ago, tears streaming down her face but making no sound. And Hank Robles, this stocky guy with prison tattoos covering his arms and neck. He's crouched down in this tiny playhouse that's designed for children, holding a claw hammer in one hand and explaining to Lily. I swear to God I heard him say this, explaining that he was going to take her fingers first so she could still talk to her daddy one last time. On this little plastic table next to him, like it was a tea party setup, there was a rusty hacksaw, some pliers, a roll of duct tape, and a bottle of water. The psychopath was preparing to torture and murder a 6-year-old child in a toy playhouse, and he'd laid out his tools like he was setting up for a craft project. I've never felt rage like I felt in that moment, never experienced that combination of horror and fury that makes you want to forget you're a law enforcement officer and just become an instrument of violence. But I didn't. I kept my head, because that little girl needed me to. The takedown was fast, but getting Lily out and seeing her face, so calm, so shocked, that's what broke me. The agent in front of me, Tommy Reeves, he moved first, grabbed Hank by the back of his shirt and yanked him out of the playhouse, so hard the whole structure shook. Hank tried to swing the hammer, missed, and Tommy put him on the ground with a knee to the spine, disarmed him, cuffed him. The whole thing took maybe 5 seconds. I dove into the playhouse, had to get on my knees because it was only about 4 feet tall inside, and I started cutting the duct tape off Lily with my pocket knife, talking to her the whole time, telling her she was safe now, we were police officers, we were taking her home to her daddy. And she just stared at me with these huge brown eyes, not crying anymore, just staring, and when I got the gag off her mouth, the first thing she said was, "He told me I could have McDonald's before he took me back to Mommy." That's what Hank had told her, that if she was good and quiet, he'd get her McDonald's and then take her home. She had no idea he was about to kill her. She was 6 years old, and she thought this was all just some weird, scary detour before she got to go home. I picked her up, carried her out of that backyard, through the house, out to the street where EMS was waiting. She weighed nothing, just this tiny fragile thing, and she put her arms around my neck and didn't let go until we got to the ambulance. Lily Harper survived physically, but I don't know if she'll ever really recover, and Hank Robles got exactly what he deserved. Life without parole in a facility where child predators don't last long. The media covered it for about a week. DEA rescues kidnapped girl from cartel enforcer, and there were press conferences and commendations, and all the usual stuff that happens after a successful operation. Lily was reunited with her father, went through months of therapy, and from what I hear through the grapevine, she's doing as well as can be expected. Ricky Harper ended up in witness protection with his daughter, gave testimony that helped us dismantle a significant portion of El Demonio's network. Carlos Vega, El Demonio himself, got picked up 3 months later trying to cross back into Mexico, and he's awaiting trial on about 40 federal charges, including conspiracy to commit murder of a minor. He'll never see daylight again. Hank Robles took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, got life without parole, and last I heard, he was in administrative segregation at ADX Florence because even in federal prison, even among the worst of the worst, guys who hurt kids are considered the lowest of the low. But here's what the media didn't cover. What doesn't make it into the official reports? I can't look at those plastic playhouses anymore without feeling sick. My own niece has one in her backyard, and I had to leave a family barbecue last summer because I couldn't stop seeing Lily's face. Couldn't stop seeing those tools laid out on that little table. The contrast of it, the innocence of that pink plastic cottage designed for children to play pretend, corrupted by a psychopath who was going to use it as a torture chamber. It represents everything that's wrong with this world, everything evil about the people we're fighting. I stayed with the DEA for 2 more years after that, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. Every case felt lighter compared to finding Lily, and every case felt heavier because I knew there were more Lilies out there, more kids in danger, and we couldn't save them all. I'm private sector now, doing security consulting, and I sleep a little better most nights. But I still think about her, wonder how she's doing, hope she's forgotten most of what happened in that playhouse. Because I never,